Welcome to the CRM MVP podcast, episode 104. Hope you guys are well. My name is Dani Kahil, and thank you, Gus, for letting me host this episode. In this podcast, we're going to talk about requirements curveballs in Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. So, as the name suggested, we're going to talk about requirements and the challenges that come with either complex, misunderstood, or ambiguous requirements. So this will not be a technical episode. We won't really talk about any specific features in Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform, but more about the challenges that we face as consultant, architect, developer when dealing with requirements. But before we get started with the show, let's do a quick round of introduction as I've invited another MVP to share his view and experience about the topic. Hamish, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, everyone. My name is Hamish, and I'm a Power Platform consultant and the founder of a company called Apprising, and we're based here in New Zealand. And so my company, we really focus on helping organizations to solve problems and achieve their goals through innovative digital solutions. And we do this by combining design thinking, which is I think well on this call, through design thinking approaches, and also the Power Platform as well as our tool set.
Great. That sounds great. And my name is Dani Kahil. I live in Australia and I specialize in mastering requirements and solution envisioning. And I really help clients, getting a shared understanding of their requirements when they implement Dynamics 365 and, the Power Platform. So Hamish, one question I was kind of wondering, because I've seen, how consulting and eliciting requirements is changing or has changed recently. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think this is a super interesting topic and one that I love to chat about. And, I've noticed, clients have kind of done the shift over the last couple of years from knowing exactly what they want. And they'll be saying things like, here are my requirements, here's my design, like just go out and build it for me. And now they're moving more to this kind of mode of saying things like, with business and technology changing so much, they don't know what they want. They don't know what's possible. And so they're coming to us and saying, this is my problem. These are my goals. And you recommend to me and provide me with the best solution based on that information. And so this kind of completely changes the way we elicit requirements. We're not asking them, what do you want? Or what are your requirements, which is kind of the traditional way of doing it. And I find this is kind of particularly true when it comes to, say, the Power Platform. You've got custom solutions versus Dynamics 365. If you're just implementing sales or service, those are pretty standard, and so customers kind of know what they're asking for that. But if they've got a particularly nasty problem they want to solve and they don't even know where to start, and it could be including things like RPA or AI Builder, clients have no idea what is actually possible. So we've got to help them through that when we're gathering our requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And I've seen this happening more and more indeed, where client kind of struggle even to come with some requirements, right? And they really expect you and kind of count on you on helping them, as you said, right? Identify what are their challenges and then translate those into requirements that fit the platform, right? So yeah, absolutely. Those consulting skills now are definitely very well regarded by clients, indeed. So before we started the podcast, Hamish, you were telling me about a very challenging project with some challenging requirements, right? Would you like to share a bit more, about this experience and what challenges you faced?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not something I love to talk about, but just had a recent project with a large enterprise client, and just a hugely complex solution that we need to basically build like a solution to help them with the back office processing of field service work orders. So this is off the back of Dynamics 365, a field service module. And the idea is that we kind of the objectives were to drive efficiencies. There's a lot of paper based and manual spreadsheet type work, reduce things like revenue leakage, and kind of automating everything all inside one system or one platform, and also standardizing their processes. So at them currently, or they used to, like, everyone would do a job slightly differently, and so they have about 100 different ways of doing the same process. So you can imagine it's just really hard to get some requirements. So this solution it's built on it's a Dataverse model driven app, built off ways with Power Automate as the kind of the processing tool behind it all, and we're very much pushing the boundaries of the capabilities. But whether I guess the requirements where it was so challenging, I think, is it really came down to, I guess, a misalignment between the product owners, the senior leadership, what their vision was, and what was actually happening at the, in reality at the user level. And so I think that it was clear on what the goals and objectives were, but what wasn't clear was how that should be implemented and what this sort of standardized process should be. And so, as I said, there's a huge amount of stakeholders involved in this, and everyone would do their job slightly differently. And so when we took requirements, we actually got requirements from the senior leadership, from managers, not from the people who do the job day to day and who would have been using the system. And so, as you'll know this, Danny, as you get through the project and you gather requirements that way, as you start doing your demos and show and tell and get into UAT, the end users are like, no, this is not going to work. We don't do it like this. And user adoption takes a dive, and you start doing rework, and it adds cost and time to the project. So that's kind of where we're at. So I think we're going to be discussing how about how you get alignment of people on a project. But I think that's hugely important, and where a lot of the complexity comes. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm sure
right.
you've got
Yeah,
some
yeah.
stories there as well, Danny, about failed projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just before I can share a bit my story. So you had multiple product owners, are you on this one that you just described, or?
Well, yeah, so that was a very funny thing. So when we were doing kind of halfway through it, doing a kind of a retrospective as one of the sprints, it was kind of identified that we didn't really know who the project owner was, right? Like, there wasn't a single kind of decision maker. Unfortunately, this is it's a bit of politics and that sort of thing in this company, and so um, there was no kind of real one single decision maker, and then the people who were kind of making decisions just weren't really in touch with what was happening in reality on the ground with the end users. And I think that misalignment was just, it made it really tough. We're getting there. We're getting through the project, but it's been a tough one.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, funny how sometimes you have that misalignment and requirements are completely off. Look, I had my story, and it's a bit the story that get me started in this whole envisioning and requirements a few years ago. It's kind of a story where project or the engagement failed because of that, and I've learned so many lessons out of it. But if I share it, it's actually those stories are the one when you actually learn the most, right? So a few years ago, I was doing an envisioning or discovery engagement for a big bank in Belgium. And it was kind of a long discovery. It took, I don't know, a few weeks, if I recall, 6 to 8 weeks, I think, to do that envisioning. So workshops with different, departments. And the goal of the discovery was to come up with, a roadmap. So effectively, they had some high level requirements, and we had to go in and kind of, identify how far we were from meeting those high-level requirements within Dynamics. It was Dynamics CRM 2011, I think, at that time. So a few years
back a little
back.
bit.
Yeah, exactly. So so yeah, how those would fit, and we would have to elaborate and help them define more specific requirements, right? And I recall having those workshops with very senior people from the different departments, and I had a workshop with the sales team, the sales leader, about their requirements. And I don't know, it was kind of a hard workshop where we couldn't get an alignment somehow on things. They were having some very um, complex requirements of how they wanted to manage opportunities and quotes and those relationships. And yeah, look, at that time I just did a quick demo of Dynamics and the out of the box CRM features, and there were a lot of gaps, and we couldn't get to that alignment. And then yeah, time was running, and effectively we kind of consolidated all the requirements from each of the departments, and we presented back to a huge audience of stakeholders at the end. And unfortunately, I've assumed things following that workshop, and I didn't really check again with them to make sure we are on the same page. So and then when I presented that final envisioning kind of delivery, it was a PowerPoint presentation, and I presented to the audience. And then look, it went fine until we reached that the sales module. And then this is where the lady just exploded during the presentation, and in front of kind of very senior stakeholders, said that we completely missed her requirements, and we didn't understand what she meant. And effectively we took some serious delays because of that. We had to redo a few workshops, and at the end of the day, they didn't selected us to kind of do the implementation. So I really heard the hard way about, what does it mean not to have that shared understanding and that alignment about requirements and small things sometimes, if you don't really get that understanding between each other, can really, if you let it slip for later, it will just blow up in your face. And so that was kind of a hard way of learning the importance of having an alignment on requirements, and started really my journey on wanted to be better at it, right? So yeah, all experience kind of comes with some benefits, right? So
Oh yeah, I think so. I think, and we've all been there, right? I think we've been in that situation where, just you completely miss the mark, and it just shows you, as you say, like, how important it is for everyone to be aligned on the same solution. And
yeah.
I think we're going to talk about some sort of tips and tricks on how to do that. But it's it's super important. It can make or break a project, can't it? Really, if you don't get it right from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. And today I run my project completely differently, the workshops. And again, we're going to share with the audience a few of our tips on how to run workshop to get alignment on requirements. So, so any other stories of kind of, almost failed projects due to, misunderstanding of requirements that you want to share, Hamish?
Yeah, I think it probably really just brings me back to the kind of that same story I talked about before. But that lack of understanding is an absolute killer. And while this, I guess, projects, it's not considered a failure. It is over time and it's over budget. And so I would personally call that a bit of a failure. And so I think I came into the project at the very last minute. And I had incorrectly assumed that all the stakeholders are on the same page. And I said, that the objectives were clear, the vision, well, objectives of what the end goal was meant to be was very clear in terms of this, driving efficiencies and all this sort of thing. But the vision of how we're going to do it in terms of standardizing processes, that was not clear, and not everyone was on the same page. And you end up in these meetings where you just go round and round in circles, right? And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where people are just talking at each other, no one's actually listening. And at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of words being spoken at people. and no one is aligned on what it really means. And so, you know, and it kind of comes down to, again, I guess, the alignment between the senior stakeholders and the users of the system. There were kind of a whole bunch of blockers, which meant that the vision that the senior stakeholders had wasn't actually going to be, I guess, feasible, because there was technical debt to deal with legacy systems. There was contractual limitations they had to deal with. The people change management was just absolutely huge, and so not everyone was aligned on all of those things, and that's what just made it, a super super tricky thing. So. I think at the end of the day, it's key that everyone is aligned, but also everyone understands who the end users are and what the jobs they have to do and what are their pain points. Because at the end of the day, it is the end users, the people on the ground who drive the business, who use the systems. So they should be at the heart of any sort of requirements gathering. So,
Yeah,
but I think,
absolutely.
but time and time again, you see it's the management giving the requirements, and they're telling you
Mm.
what the problems are, but they quite often don't know the real problems. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and any specific techniques or tips, that you want to share of how you deal with complex or ambiguous requirements?
Yeah. So I think, and this I probably alluded to it just before, but you've really just got to start with those end users. That is super critical. Um, and they're the people, as I said, they'll be using the end solution. They're the ones that are driving the solution and its success. And so it's just really about, spending some time with those end users, understand their current tools, their current processes, what are their pain points, get to understand, what are the real world scenarios they're dealing with. And I also think, data can tell you a lot. So go and view the systems they use and the data that they're interacting with, the reports they're getting out. Go and study and analyze that data, because it will tell you so much more than what the users tell you. And so, if you're doing like a requirements gathering and you're just asking them questions about what are their pain points, they'll tell you something probably quite different from what you will observe if you go and live in their shoes for a little while. And I think it was that famous Henry Ford quote around, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Um, and I guess that's the kind of the classic example, right? So, through this, I guess, this example project we're talking about, where it's not going, the requirements are pretty difficult. When we actually started talking to the end users and looking at the data that they're dealing with, it just brought to light a whole, I guess the real requirements really started coming out then, and we started to make some real traction. And so I think that's kind of my biggest tip around, dealing with vague or complex requirements is, get, get to understand the end users and the people who will be using the solution and their problems, get to understand their data, and it's about, living in their shoes and being in their shoes, really. It's, you can ask all the questions you want and they can tell you everything, but you still probably won't get the true requirements
Yeah.
until I guess, really empathize with them, I think, is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think I truly kind of resonate a bit with what you said, because I try to do some shadowing sessions actually with the end user, right?
Yeah.
And they are well, you cannot do too many of those because they're time consuming, and they take a bit of time to arrange. But indeed, to what you said, really empathizing with your user, you will never get all the answers during a workshop with them, right? There will
Yeah.
always be things missing. And I remember I did one for a university where we had an initial workshop with, the stakeholders, and it was about how they communicate to their students, right? And yeah, we capture some of the high level requirements, and then we explicitly asked to go and sit to some of the users, right, to see a bit how they communicate, what they do when students reply and so on, right? And then I remember sitting next to one lady, and how she started communicating with students was with So she had to communicate to a bunch of 100, 200 students about, some exams that were, they had to provide some information about exams, right? So it was almost like a bulk email that she was doing using Outlook. And then as she showed me how she was doing that bulk email communication and the tracking, because then she was tracking everything. She was flagging, putting that in folders to make sure that she follow up with the students. It kind of straight away, and she didn't really told us that during the workshop, right? It came up when I sat next to her and she showed us how she does. And I remember we translated that into kind of a feature in Dynamics where she could build emails students, and then for that specific type of users we made it possible for them to create cases automatically. So from the 100 or 200 emails that were sent, automatically a case was created for her so that she can track for each of those communication the back and forth, and she can track in a case all that history. But I think if I would not have sat next to her to see how she works, I probably might have missed that one. So definitely something where, as you said, right, sitting next to your user and really empathizing. And also, I think you straight away, when you sit next to a user and you do those shadowing sessions, you kind of pick a little bit the you know, unwritten challenges and the frustrations they have sometimes, right?
Yeah,
Where sometimes in workshop they don't even tell you, but then you kind of feel that something is frustrating them, and then they will quickly, oh, and this is so frustrating because then I have to do this and that, and then you pick those kind of unwritten
I think so. 'Cause,
requirements. Yeah.
'cause when you're in a
Mm,
workshop, I mean, you're completely in a completely different room, a different space, and
mm,
they're so used to doing their job day to day, and it's just kind of like hardwired into their brain that they probably can do the job without even
mm,
thinking about it, and they don't realize some of the time-consuming manual stuff that they do. You said, talking around emails and cases, uh,
yeah.
and when you view what they're doing, and you can say, well, hey, did you know we could remove that thing from your part of what you do as a job? And you see their eyes light up like, yeah, really? And because they again comes back to they don't know what to ask, they don't know what's possible with the technology,
Mm,
so they don't ask it. And so yeah, you really need
yeah.
to I think for with all of my engagements, I'm try and make sure we have some sort of day in the life of exercise. And as you say, yes, it is time consuming, but it is absolutely gold in terms of getting those requirements and identifying the real needs. And you end up with far better solutions. So that kind of time and money from the customer spent upfront on those day in the life of sessions is well spent, and pays dividends later in the project. Yeah, because you end up having to rehash requirements and rebuild the solution, because you've got it right first time.
Yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. And another one where that I've learned again throughout my mistakes, right, is to try to empathize with your users, because it's a bit difficult doing workshop asking. I mean, you ask interviews and questions, right, and you try to not miss anything, and then they respond. Then, but I found it very valuable to kind of almost create stories of a scenario, right? And 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 I would really then have a story that fits kind of a journey that is part of the industry, or the services that the client is selling or providing. So if you're talking about a university or a healthcare provider, I will draft scenarios during workshop where a student comes in at the receptions. He has this kind of problems, and then you open Dynamics, and then he tells you. So I really try now to again make those stories so relatable for the client doing workshops, so that they almost envision themselves doing that. And and again, it's just to trigger anything that they might think of to tell you, right? Because otherwise there is a bit of a disconnect I found if you don't really bring them into some situations. So having this, I found it quite valuable. And a story I had also about that was, so I was running a workshop about, so concretely, right? It's a concrete example. I was running a workshop with a client about contact types. Contact type in Dynamics. So that client actually, so they were going from a legacy system, right? And they were managing contact types as separate contacts. So you, Hamish, could be 3 times in their legacy system because you were once a client, you were a referrer, and you were a family member of another client, and they had 3 records of the same Hamish, right? And then when we came in working with them in Dynamics, we kind of introduced the concept. Look, the contact is one person, right? The contact, the physical Hamish is one person, right? So it's a bit of a data deduplication if you have to have three same persons. So let's use a flag. Let's use, the because we proposed then the multi-select option set to to have Hamish is actually 3 of the 4 or the 5 contact types, right? And I started just telling that we're going to use the flag, and I showed them the flag without really introducing a scenario. And some of them were lost doing a workshop. They couldn't really understand that. And I've seen kind of their way of looking, and I kind of drilled a bit more into those details, and I really tried to understand, well, what isn't clear. Can you Don't hesitate to ask me, is it clear? So I really tried to extract the information, and we couldn't get to that understanding. And then I stepped back, and then I said, look, let's forget about what I said. Let's imagine a story. And I explained again a story where, Hamish, let's say Hamish now is starting to interact with you, right? And, he's requesting your services. So Hamish is your client, right? And then, a few months later, Hamish is happy, he's still your client. A few months later, Hamish comes back to the service, and effectively he wants to refer his mother, right? Because he thinks his mother would really benefit from your service. So now in Dynamics, you find, Hamish, and instead of recreating Hamish, you just flag him with. So I had to introduce a bit of that story, talking in the term of the client, for them to, understand the context of where to use that flag. So sometimes I find that really using those stories when presenting, or scenario when presenting requirements, helps as well.
I think that's so key. And I find telling those stories, but also telling like their stories. So that's why I say, looking at their data, and you told, I guess, a story based on a real scenario for them. Because sometimes I find if you tell a story that doesn't really relate to them, or it's not relevant to them, then you can completely miss, you can kind of miss the mark as well. But I think it's really, it comes back to this empathizing, understanding them. Can you tell stories that are relevant to them? Because it'll bring it to life. Because if you just talk technology to them, most of the time, it doesn't. It's hard to understand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have different levels, right, of people. That's the thing, right? You have some that will understand it straight away, and unfortunately others that will it will take a bit more time for them to kind of follow you and follow the technology and follow what you're showing. So yeah, definitely. So another question I had, right? So can you, because I know you're known a bit for your design thinking, activities and concept using this in Dynamics and the Power Platform. Can you share with us, some of your design thinking techniques, and how, it helps you really identify the true requirements?
Yeah, and I think, and this is why this whole conversation we're having today is kind of why I've got into design thinking. I guess for those who don't know much about it, I'll start off with a bit of a definition, but there's many definitions, but the one that I like the most is a human-centered approach and mindset for creating innovative solutions. And so when I talk about innovative solutions, I know that innovation's a massive buzzword. And so to define what innovation is. It's something, a product or a service or a solution that is, is technically feasible. So you can do it with the tools and the technology available today. It's viable from a business perspective, so it's going to give a good ROI, and the people are the investment put in is you're going to get money back from it. And thirdly, it is desirable from a human perspective, which means that users are going to love the service or product, and they're going to use it, and that will then obviously drive the business benefits. And so that's I guess the concepts behind design thinking. And so design thinking kind of comes with like a bunch of tools. It's got kind of techniques and mindsets is very important as well. And that helps you get this kind of clear understanding of your users, and then obviously collecting the right requirements. And so the reason why I like design thinking is that digital transformation projects or software implementations, doesn't really matter what software you're doing, but it's massively complex, and I guess probably now more than ever, companies have they're very limited in terms of resources. They don't have a lot of time. They lack the technical skills in-house, especially as technology is changing. We've talked about the misalignment. So there's the misalignment between the IT and the business. You've got misalignment between the business and the business. And then, most companies still lack insights and data to drive decisions. And so this is where kind of design thinking comes in and helps kind of overcome a lot of those problems we have with digital transformation, requirements gathering, and all that sort of thing. So there's a huge amount of resources and kind of things you can get started with it. And I think we can probably put in the show notes a bunch of links I can give you. But in terms of like design thinking tools that we can use, we've already talked a lot about you start with the end users in mind. So the people who will actually be using your software, start with them and empathize with them. And so we talked about how you can do day in the life of, sit with them. Another kind of technique I think is really important is to help the users visualize what that solution may look like. So, how are we going to solve their problem? And you talked about storytelling as a very good technique for helping them visualize. I'm a massive fan of a whiteboard. Just get a whiteboard and draw diagrams and draw kind of mock-ups of screens and all sorts of things. Been using online, whiteboards a lot recently. With Mural, loving Mural at the moment.
Mural.
It's very good. Yeah, it's awesome. And people love playing with the online post-it notes, and they can interact with it as well. And I think that is really engaging when you are in a virtual environment. Otherwise, it's really hard to run workshops virtually. And you can do other things like mock up data in spreadsheets and create prototypes. So the Power Platform and Dynamics it's so quick and easy to mock up a couple of screens and build the base of an app, just so you can show the client what is it going to look like. It helps them visualize, and that helps everyone get on the same page, and they can understand, okay, this is the solution, this is what it looks like, this is how it behaves. I can start to see what I'm getting. Whereas I think as traditionally, and I'd do this all in the design phase, right? Traditionally, you would go gather requirements, you'd write a business requirements document, and that would take a few weeks, and that would be 100 or so pages. Then you'd go away and do a design document with the solution to all those requirements. And so the customer would see just screeds and screeds of paper. They wouldn't understand half the words on the documents, and it could be months before you even start showing them something. And at that stage, you could have got them completely wrong because you weren't aligned. So that's probably one of the first, I guess, tips. But there are, I guess, a bunch of other tools with design thinking around, once you've understood your users, you can draw up empathy maps or persona profiles. It's just a way of really quickly and easily documenting, the people you're designing for. And so the whole team can get on board with, what are their pain points and what are their problems. I love customer journey mapping. I think people have probably heard of that as well. But basically, you list out a whole bunch of high-level steps for a process, and you go through, okay, what actions do the users need to take when they're doing these actions? What are they thinking or they're feeling? What are their pain points? And what other things are they interacting with? And out of that, you typically find you come out with a whole bunch of opportunities to solve their problems or to help them, and they then start becoming like your backlog items, and you can start ideating on those. And so, a big thing, with design thinking is around um, trying to come up with as many ideas as possible for your solution. And so, customer journey mapping, I think, finds it kind of gets people in that kind of mindset, and it
Yeah.
helps with that, brainstorming exercises. Another one is how might we questions. So I know, Danny,
Yeah.
you're a big fan of how might we, and so I guess the how might we is basically a way of taking your problem statements, and turning them into
Mm.
something a bit more positive. So it enables you to have the opportunity to think of solutions rather than focusing on the negative problem. And so an example is something like, you may say, okay, our customers hate our experience for our I don't know, delivery service. And so instead of having that as your problem statement, it really should be, how might we give our customers a better experience with our delivery service? And all of a sudden, you've turned it on its head. It's more positive, and you're more likely to think of solutions rather than focusing on the problem. Um, and I could just I could keep going on and on about all these tools. There's things like dot voting. So when you are brainstorming, everyone has a bunch of ideas, and you then use these. You may have a whole bunch of ideas on a post-its on a wall, and you use people then read through all the ideas, and then you go around and you vote on ideas. So people by placing a dot on each one, and that's a way for people to everyone gets to have their say, by putting the post-it notes up on the wall, and then you also get to have your say again by voting on the ones that you think are most important. And that kind of brings in, again, a shared understanding. Not one person is defining the requirements; you're all doing it together, and that's a really good tool actually for bringing people together and having a shared understanding. And then the last one, there's so many more, but my last favorite one out of this list is the effort impact matrix, which I think,
Yeah.
Danny, you also use a lot as well. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
just such an awesome tool. You've
Yeah.
got these ideas, and you like, which one do you start with? What do you prioritize? And so an effort impact matrix has two axes. One is
Mm.
the effort, so what it takes to build the solution, and the
Yeah.
impact it will have. And so what you end up doing is you place them on this matrix based on that kind of
Mm.
scale, and you should end up picking the items that are high impact and low effort, and that's what you focus on. And it's a pretty rudimentary tool, but it's incredible at how effective. It's just super effective and very quick to do. So, um, yeah, just a few tools there for you, Danny. But I'll,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll put some
Great.
links. I'll put some links in the show notes, because there's just a wealth of information about these things out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, look, I've used that as you mentioned. I use not all the time, but there was quite a bit the how might we statement, and then I complement that with also it's a design thinking technique, also quite documented, but I use in combination with the how might we the abstraction laddering, right?
Yes, yeah,
So, um, so once we have identified kind of the how might we want to solve, I then go and work with the bunch of stakeholders on using the abstraction laddering, and then and one example we recently had with a client, so we implemented for them Dynamics 365 customer service to manage all their enrollments of clients, and then they wanted to have a portal. Um, but they didn't really know what to put on the portal, right? They had various ideas, but since they never had a portal, they didn't really work that way. Everything was quite, you know, personal. So they were seeing clients face to face. And now, also with COVID, they had to kind of switch a bit of mindset. But then we want a portal, but what do we put on the portal, right? And there were some ideas, they weren't clear. And then what I proposed to them, he said, look, guys, let's organize a session, a workshop, a few hours, a few exercises together where invite a bunch of your different stakeholders, including some of your, so they had some clients advocate as well that were previously clients and then now help them identify and refine their processes. So it was kind of a management, stakeholders, users of Dynamics and kind of employees of the company plus those client ambassadors. So it was kind of a good audience. And then what we did, we started with the how might we statement that, so one of the IT leader came up with the how might we they wanted to kind of brainstorm. And then the how might we was for this portal was, how might we let our client get access to our services when they want, so at the time they want, and with their preferred method of communication. That was kind of so they had a few problem statement before, and we kind of came together with the one we wanted to solve, right? So really helping clients reaching our services when at the time they wanted and by the preferred method they wanted. And then we used for that the abstraction laddering, where we drafted this how might we statement on a whiteboard, and then we started with the why. So everyone could kind of brainstorm for, so it's a half a minute or a minute. Actually, it's a little bit more, maybe 2-3 minutes to kind of think about some of the whys ideas, and everybody put them on the board, and then another 2 or 3 minutes to work on the how. So how are we going to, and the idea is to extract yourself completely from the technology, right? We're not focusing only on the portal here. We're focusing broadly. What would be, how can we actually solve or respond to that how might we statement? What are the possible solutions, right? And the why helps you make sure that you're solving the correct problem, and it will help you maybe refine your problem statement. And the how will give you concrete solutions that you can then put on exactly what you said, the difficulty matrix. I think it's called various ways, right? It has also those two axes, and all your hows, you put them on that matrix, and then you see which one is actually the most valuable for the less kind of investment, right? But funny enough, I mean, when people were drafting the house, all kind of different solutions came in. Like we had to introduce, just staff that were picking the phone. So they didn't have a 24-hour, staff covering answering phones and responding to chat. So they had to introduce that. Nothing to do with the portal or dynamics. Suddenly they realized, oh, we need staff to be available 24 hours, or at least a small amount of staff be available 24 hours. We need to offer, for example, a WhatsApp channel, right? We need to have those tools available. And then we put those tools, we made them available on the portal so that when the client logs into the portal, he sees all those communication methods and he knows which one he want to use, right? So it's funny how those tools kind of help you pick some of the requirements or the challenges that sometimes have nothing to do with with dynamics or what we do. It's something different, right? So yeah, so that was kind of an interesting one I had a few months ago. Yeah, and I know you also did, I think, Hamish, a course on design sprints lately. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So I've got a little bit of a fascination with design sprints at the moment, as well as design thinking. And so again, I guess the way I explain design sprints is that I guess design thinking is this kind of approach, mindset. It's pretty fuzzy, right, in terms of how you go about design thinking. It's actually, there's always tools, but there's no kind of real set way of how you do it. It's pretty fluffy, very creative, which can be quite hard for. I mean, especially someone like myself. I used to be a developer. I come from a technical background. I like things just so, and so to have to use my creative mind and I find a bit of a struggle with the ambiguity and everything that design thinking brings. And so design sprints is actually a way that basically it's like a step-by-step process which tells you how to do design thinking. And that's essentially what it is. So it's kind of like your design thinking, I've had described to me as if you're making a meal, design thinking are your ingredients, And the
Yeah.
design sprint is your instructions for building.
Yeah.
Put it all
Your
together. It's a
recipe, right? Or
recipe, right?
something.
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
I love that analogy. It's so good. So so design sprints is basically it's like a 4 or 5 day process. Step by step. You've got some very strict rules around what you do and what you can't do. But basically helps you rapidly solve big challenges. And that could either be or creating new products or new services or improving existing ones. And this sort of process can like potentially take months to do. It just smashes it all out in 1 week. And so I probably won't go into much detail about exactly what it is, but the reason I like it is it kind of overcomes those problems around having kind of an unclear goal or vision. It brings when you do a design sprint, you do it in a kind of a very diverse team, so it gets everyone aligned. um, Helps you gather some real data, so you actually get real insights to what you're building, and you know that you're kind of on the right path. You definitely avoid project fatigue because it's very short and sharp.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and it kind of it relieves that pressure to have to to innovate. We all, innovation is just a buzzword. We've all got to innovate and do something creative and new. um, this, because it's a very strict and rigid process, it help you become kind of creative. It kind of drives that creativity, and it drives innovation in itself without having to really try. Um, and so there's a kind of a few principles that come with it in terms of there's one called work together alone, which basically means quite a lot throughout the sprint in terms of the exercises that you do. You are all sitting in a room, but you're doing it in silence, and you're writing on post-it notes, or um, you're drawing diagrams or drawing mock-ups or whatever. And you do a lot of that alone, and then there are times you come together and you can discuss, but it's to try avoid that constant back and forth of discussion and not getting anywhere. It really drives quick
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah.
And another one, another key principle is around, you show but don't tell. So again, avoiding all that constant discussion, and we just show and make things tangible. Again, all about getting people aligned. And it's very much weighted again to getting started over being right. So just get started, and you may fail, but you will learn a lot more than trying to get it perfect the first time. Um, yeah, and so I guess in terms of I guess how it all works out is you kind of got we'll take the 4 day sprint for example. But basically on a Monday you'll spend that first day doing a little bit of empathizing. You'll define the challenges, and you'll produce kind of a whole I guess defining challenges, and you produce some key questions that you need to answer in that sprint. Then you use some brainstorming and produce some solutions. And then the second day, you actually start kind of working on those solutions, vote on the best ones that you think will succeed. So that's kind of where your effort impact matrix comes in. And then you start prototyping. So you start drawing storyboards and screenshots and those sorts of things. And so that's kind of the first 2 days are just full on workshops. You've probably got a team of maybe 8 people all in one room. So it is very
Yeah.
time
Right.
intensive. You've got to take the time out.
Mhm.
And then the second 2 days, kind of the Wednesday and Thursday, is around the Wednesday is just full prototype build. And so where this kind of comes at nice with Dynamics and the Power Platform is you could just spend a whole day just building inside the platform that you're probably going to deliver in the end. And so you're kind of halfway there with your solution, and it is crazy what we've all done hackathons and things, right? It is amazing what you can do in a day with a few people if you're organized. And then the final day is all about you test it. So you basically take it to the real users and get them to use it for a day, and you interview them, but you observe them using your system, and you learn from that, and you'll gather real data from that and insights, and that will drive your decisions around, hey, have we got the design right or not, or doing it back to the drawing board. And so the design sprint really, it kind of takes that sort of discovery design part of your implementation project, rams it all
Yeah.
into a
Right.
week.
Mhm.
um, uh, and by the end of that, you've got yourself a usable prototype, which you've still then got to you'll probably have some agile sprints to completely implement it and finish it. But it's amazing how far you can get in a sprint. So I think sprints are they're also not used for they're not for everyone, right? In terms of you've got to have a specific challenge. So in terms of I guess Dynamics 365, if you're just doing a standard sales implementation, you probably wouldn't use a sprint because you don't really have any problems to solve necessarily. But if you're doing some sort of custom power platform solution where you don't really know what you should be using, if it's RPA or AI Builder or
Yeah.
Canvas apps or model apps or
Yeah.
all of that sort of stuff, then design sprints are perfect for that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And would you use them once, or kind of you, I mean, because it's quite time intensive, right?
It's
As
super
well. I
time
mean,
intensive. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very,
yeah.
yeah. So I've
So
seen,
would you use them once at the beginning of your implementation, or do you use them per module, you think, once in a while, or how
yeah. So
does
each
Mm,
sprint, you really do zone in on a very particular problem. And so if you've got quite a large project, you may do multiple design sprints as you solve the different challenges in the project. You've got to, I guess, within a week, you've only so much you can do in a week, right? But I've also seen, people may do a couple of iterations of design sprints because
yeah.
because the problem is so big and you want to iterate
All
on it one
right.
more time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
there is some flexibility in terms of how you do it, but it's not a delivery mechanism. It's very much
Mm,
you know getting the right requirements, getting the right solution, the right design. Um, and again, I think it's our kind of common theme is getting everyone aligned on what that solution is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I think the nice things about those techniques, and whether it's design thinking or not, but the techniques where you use those diagrams and you use some of those techniques to kind of discuss ideas, but then I found quite valuable the fact that you take then a few minutes after everybody put their ideas, you take a few minutes and ask everyone to vote
Yep.
for the
Voting's
best
big in this.
ideas, right?
Yep.
Because what I realized is when I started this design thinking path, I started, yeah, probably it's probably good to kind of understand which ones are kind of the ideas that are worth, where everybody thinks that are effectively the best. But it's actually serves two purposes. I realized when I was doing it. The first purpose, it really serves to make sure that voting will help everyone in the team going and making sure they understand each of the ideas. It's almost like before I vote, I need to understand what the other person mean.
Yep.
So I will take the time to read each ideas, and then if I don't understand, I will ask that person. So it's almost like again, it's coming to that shared understanding, right? And then you
Exactly.
vote. So it kind of has two kind of positives. And the first one was a little. I didn't really understood that first one before really doing it, right? So
Yeah. And they've done it the processes around this are done in a way, right? So for particular reasons. One, so you get
mm,
that sheet understanding. The other one as well, where you write your ideas on post-it notes in silence, um,
yeah,
is done on purpose, right? Because when you have a workshop, you'll find that one or two people will talk all the time and they'll
yeah, yeah,
overpower everyone else, and no one else gets to put their ideas in. Where if you do it in silence, write on your post-it note, everyone's ideas are out there, they're on the board, and you'll probably find that those people who are loud and overpower are voting for the ideas that the quiet people have, because quite often it's the
yeah,
quiet people who are thinking more rather than talking, and they have amazing ideas. And you don't get
yeah,
that in a
right.
standard workshop because you've always got someone overpowering the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Absolutely interesting. Well, Hamish, was lovely to have you on the show.
Hey mate, it's been
Thank you
I love
for your,
yeah,
yeah, it was good.
I love chatting about this sort of stuff. Yeah, very very passionate about it, and I know it's just great to have someone like yourself just across the ditch, to discuss these things with.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just before we finish, any kind of maybe tips for someone that would like to just start the journey on design thing or those concept about shared understanding? Where do you start? Would you get have any recommendations?
Yeah, definitely. So, I got into design thinking through a company called Ideo. So Ideo are a big design company and very well known in I think in the US, it's where they're based, but I guess they are the design thinking people. But they also have an offshoot company called Ideo, which is their learning platform. So go and check that out, and it's quite expensive, the platforms, but it's well worth it. But if you go to their website, there's a whole bunch of other resources linked to that. If you look up, there's a thing called Design Kit, and basically it's like a
Yeah,
big
right.
PDF of just all these exercises, like the lettering and the how might we's. It's all there. Stanford D.school as well. If you look up that, Stanford Design School. Again, I think it's kind of where design thinking kind of came out of as well. And IBM also do have a program called Enterprise Design Thinking. And so all of those, if you go and look at those, they all have like free tools and things, videos, there's resources you can go watch. In terms of design sprints, I did my course through a company called AJ and Smart, and they work
Yeah,
quite closely with the
yeah,
guy who wrote the book.
yeah, right.
I'll read actually just read the book called Design Sprint. It's awesome. And then also Design Sprint actually came out of Google. So if you Google Design Sprints, Google, they've also got their own website with, again, just a whole bunch of content of where to get started. So there's actually a lot of stuff you can get for free if you want to. And I'm just looking at my notes there, but also Microsoft Catalyst. I don't know if anyone's
Yeah,
working with
right.
that at the moment, but that actually has
Mm,
design thinking elements in it as well.
yeah.
So I mean, just go Google design thinking and design sprints, and you'll just see a wealth of information. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe we'll put some in the show notes, yeah.
yeah, I can think so
And
for sure. Yeah,
yeah, and I think the best way also, but it's how I started, is just start, right? And the first one will be a bit challenging, the first workshop you have,
yeah,
but there is no other way or no better way than really experimenting. And each time you do one, you get out of the workshop and then, oh, I've learned so much about the company, about the challenges, but also about the process and how I can make it better next time.
yeah. Did you find it
So
was?
yeah, just doing it, right?
Yeah, do you find it's quite nerve wracking the first time you try something new in front
Oh
of a client? They look
yeah.
at you kind of like, "What are you
Oh
doing? This is
yeah.
weird."
Absolutely. Even for me, I think the first one I run, I was a little bit, looking a bit what to do next and having all my notes. But then I did it once and then, yeah, I made some mistakes, but whatever. I've learned quite a bit and I think it was very valuable for the clients as well. And then, yeah, I improved my process along the way. So, yeah,
That's right. I
definitely
think
start something.
yeah, and I mean,
Mm,
the feedback I get, I mean, the clients I do it with, just they love it. They just love it. And now I've got some clients who just say, "Hamish, I want you to come in and run workshops for us," and
mm,
like nothing to do with Dynamics or Power Platform. They go, so I've
yeah.
got a problem to solve. Come in and run a
Yeah.
workshop with us." And yeah, and so I love it. It's awesome. So yeah, don't be afraid to try it. I think clients
Mm,
I found at start are like, this guy's a bit of a weirdo, and this
yeah.
is not the way to do kind of technology requirements. But yeah, I find by the end of the session, or we've had a few sessions, they understand it, and then you start seeing results. You see those common understanding of requirements and alignment, and then people get it and go, "Hey, yeah, this is why we're doing this, and it actually works." Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you. Great to have you on board and always chatting and the passion you have for this subject is really, driving and exciting. Thank you again. And thank you
Awesome.
for the audience. And yeah, see you soon.
Awesome.
Hopefully
Yeah,
one day, Hamish.
so yeah, we have to see it in person. Well, now the bubble's open between New Zealand and Australia. We'll definitely, I'm sure,
Yeah,
we'll have to catch up.
exactly.
But yeah, but hey, thank you so much for having me,
Exactly.
and thanks for organising this. It's been an awesome chat, and yeah, had a good time.